Sledgehammer Method. Back in 2009 in Michoacan, at the height of Mexico's bloodiest cartel war, La Familia Michoacana, LFM, caught two informants and decided a gun was way too merciful. So they brought out a sledgehammer. Believe me, this isn't for the faint-hearted, as the hammer smashed bone and flesh into a dripping pulp, all captured on camera to send Los Zetas a message they'd never forget. Just so we're clear, this was a snuff film, a recording of an actual murder. Now don't even search for it, it's scrubbed from most archives and finding it won't do you any good, as it might just make you want to puke. Every second of their suffering was taped, and when the footage began they were already half destroyed. Faces swollen and split open, eyes puffed shut, teeth missing, skin purple and raw. Blood had dried in thick crusts across their clothes, and every groan showed the torture had been going on long before the filming began. They made them kneel in some isolated woods while a bunch of masked psychos filmed their last moments on a shaky camera. The madman running this show decided the opening scene needed a more dramatic impact than a simple gunshot could ever provide. Enter the sledgehammer, or mazo as they call it, a brutally honest tool that redefined method acting. Each blow turned flesh into carnage, splitting arms and legs until what was left wasn't really human anymore. But the hammer was just the beginning. Next came a machete and a beheading that was way more personal and messier. To finish it off, they carved a Z into the bodies afterward, La Familia's way of signing their work and making sure Los Zetas got the message loud and clear. The most disturbing part is that LFM's leaders actually believed they were doing God's work, calling this divine justice against evil. But that sledgehammer video was just the beginning. The cartels were about to get way more creative with their messaging. The face-stitching method. Okay, so you think the last story was rough? Let me shock you with what happened to Hugo Hernandez. In January 2010, he found out the hard way that you should never, ever double-cross a multi-billion-dollar drug cartel. Hugo was a former police informant who apparently decided to dabble in the rival Juarez cartel's business, which from the Sinaloa cartel's perspective was a serious breach of professional etiquette. Instead of simply sending him a termination letter, they kidnapped him, took him to their home turf of Los Mochis, and got creative. First, they disassembled him into 7 easy-to-transport pieces and scattered his pieces around town like a grisly treasure hunt. His torso turned up stuffed inside a plastic container. Elsewhere in the city, a box was found containing his severed arms, legs, and his skull. But the most horrifying part of the discovery, the bit that really shows a flair for the dramatic, was what they did with his face. It had been peeled off and then stitched onto a soccer ball. I know it sounds like a rejected premise from a horror movie, but this was very, very real. They left this awful art project near the city hall because when you're sending a message, you might as well send it to the mayor's doorstep. The accompanying handwritten note was a real masterstroke of passive aggression. Happy New Year because it's the last one. It's the kind of seasonal greeting that makes you reconsider your life choices. The symbolism is actually darkly clever in a horrifying sort of way. By using a soccer ball, they were saying that they own the game, they make the rules, and they'll literally turn your face into a plaything if you try to score on them. The human stew method. But if you thought a soccer ball was creative, wait until you hear about Los Zetas' signature method, something they called El Guiso, which translates to the stew. And yeah, before you ask, that's exactly as horrifying as it sounds. The main ingredient was always a live, breathing human being, and the cooking instructions were deceptively simple. 1 55-gallon oil drum, a generous helping of diesel fuel, and an open flame. The recipe was perfected around 2002, with early taste tests conducted on 4 municipal police officers in Nuevo Laredo, who had the poor judgment to side with a local rival named El Chacho. Now here's where it gets really personal. And I mean that in the worst possible way. This was their favorite elimination method that usually happened on a remote ranch, where the only witnesses were the stars and the other men holding the gasoline can. Imagine the nightmare. You're forced inside the drum, the splash of diesel fuel soaking your clothes and skin, followed by the first strike of a match. Then came the true horror, the sensation of the metal itself growing warm, then hot, then searing, as the fire licked at the drum's exterior, slowly roasting you alive from the outside in. And you feel every single degree as it climbs. The goal wasn't just to kill you. Come on, a bullet would have been a mercy. No, this was about turning you into nothing but ash, and a story that would make grown men think twice about crossing Los Zetas. Miguel Trevino Morales, one of their top guys, turned this into an art form. His own men had a saying that should chill you to the bone. If Trevino called you to a meeting, you weren't walking out of that meeting. Period. Talk about a hostile work environment. Which brings us to our next stop. The chainsaw beheading method. Michoacan in 2006 was a battleground for rival drug cartels vying for control of some seriously lucrative trafficking routes. On one side, you had the Gulf Cartel and its feared enforcers, Los Zetas. On the other, the Sinaloa Cartel. Fast forward to 2011 and an infamously brutal video surfaced, another snuff film linked to 2006 events. Now by hostile work environment, I don't mean a jerk boss or a broken coffee machine. I'm talking about a performance review for two Sinaloa employees, which we'll call S1 and S2, conducted by Zeta's management that completely redefined the term aggressive feedback. The first guy's evaluation was a live demonstration of efficiency. A manager started a gasoline-powered chainsaw that shook the room with a rattling whine, a broken metallic wail that seemed to stretch forever before the blade even touched flesh. When contact came, it was savage. The saw chewed through muscle and spine in ragged jerks, painting the walls in a vibrating red mist. The video didn't cut away, and within seconds, amid gushing blood, S1 was decapitated in full view of the camera. S2 was then promoted to the main event. Forced to witness his comrade's gruesome end, he began to hyperventilate and sob. Upper management, wanting to showcase its versatility, opted for a more traditional hands-on approach with a large knife. What followed was an even more drawn-out horror for S2 as he was beheaded while still alive, thrashing in pure agony. In the final frames, the killers held up the two severed heads triumphantly for the camera, like some kind of grisly trophy display. The entire team-building exercise was filmed for internal training, and let's be honest, for the company's burgeoning social media presence. After all, in today's competitive market, you can't just be feared, you have to be followed. It was a bold HR strategy, but you can't argue with the results. As for you, the lesson is simple, maybe just don't break the law. The Flaying Method. Alright, so this one is about skinning people alive, and if you think you can handle hearing about it, let me tell you, you can't. Back in 2010, a cartel feud turned northwest Mexico into a slaughterhouse, and two unfortunate men landed on the losing end. Look, when you think cartel violence, you probably picture shootouts in the street, right? But the real horror plays out behind locked doors in forgettable rooms where the only exit is death. They were accused of sharing a little too much intel with a rival faction led by a guy named El Aquiles. Their judge, jury, and executioner was El Guicho Carrillo, whose crew was convinced El Aquiles' men had been leaking info to either the authorities or enemy cartels. Guicho had a unique approach when it came to dealing with betrayal. It wasn't some impersonal drive-by. This was up close and personal, a slow torture session that took suffering to a whole new level. The captives were flayed from the torso upward, knives carving until skin hung in ragged ribbons, and muscle twitched in the air. By the time the blades reached their faces, the screams turned into this awful gurgling silence. Blood was everywhere, pooling on the floor, and the whole room reeked of iron and raw flesh. The torture didn't let up until their bodies finally gave out, slumping into a bloody, lifeless stillness. Some even claimed the brutality didn't stop there, and that their hearts were cut out after the flaying was done. And of course, like all good cartel productions, they filmed the whole damn thing. That little red recording light catching every second of gore. The message was plain enough. Cross them and the guys you shared beers with will peel you like fruit, nice and slow, just to prove a point. Cartel deaths aren't just stories, they're nightmares made real. If you made it this far, you've stared straight into them. Take care of yourself because the darkness has a way of sticking.